Hey everyone, welcome to another Intro to HTML video. In this video we're going to work on the pull quote or block quote. A block quote or pull quote is a quotation from a body of text that you pull out of that body of text to stand out, catch the viewer's attention, and draw them into the article. Usually it's an important piece of the article. It's usually some piece of the article that's going to be interesting and intriguing and entice people into reading the article. You see them a lot of times on web pages and in magazines. What you see on the screen right now is an example of a block quote that I inserted into the web page that we've been building over the past several videos. I deleted all the CSS, but I kept this up, not refreshed. Let's take a look at the markup. So as we've had before, I've got a wrapper that wraps everything up, a header at top with an H1 in it, nav with a UL, a bunch of LIs, and links in all of those. This was from the previous video where we made the rollover navigation. I've got a div with an ID main content, which is going to be my left article, or my left column. It's got an article, an H2, and a couple paragraphs in it. Then I've got my sidebar with an article, an H2, and some paragraphs in it. You should have this same markup from previous videos. If you don't, maybe you might want to go back and watch those and make sure that you get that markup. You should always continue to save the markup that we build in previous videos because we're always going to be building on it. Now, let's get on to the block quote. The block quote is defined with the block quote tag. I've put mine in the main content, in the article, right below the first paragraph and above the second paragraph. Okay, so it's in between where the first paragraph closes and the new paragraph opens. And it's defined with the block quote tag, just block quote. You don't need to put a paragraph in there, you don't need to put anything else in there, just block quote. When I save this and refresh it, all my style goes away, and you can see there's nothing really special about it. It just looks like another paragraph. So we have to style it to do all that stuff that we want. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add that large drop quote there. You'll notice I don't have any content there for a quote. Okay, I don't have that quotation mark that you saw in the block quote. I'm going to insert that. Let's go up to the style sheet. We need to add two style rules. Block quote colon before. In a previous video, you saw us use this colon in a selector. We saw that in a link, a visited, a hover, and a active. The colon denotes a pseudo-class selector. And what this is going to do is it's going to say right before the block quote happens, we're going to do some stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert some content. We have a property called content. And what content does, it allows us to insert whatever we want. Into the web page. So, block quote before, content, whatever we want. We're going to look at it beforehand. There's nothing there, just lorem ipsum dolor sidamet. Insert whatever we want. So that's what the content does. We can also insert a drop quote. And I'm going to use the Unicode code for the left or opening hanging quote. That's 201C. So you need to have the double quotes here to say that there's going to be a string slash 201C. Save it, and what you should see is that whatever you want that I just deleted should be replaced with the hanging drop quote, which it is. Excellent. So I've inserted my quote there, but that's not all. I need to adjust some things. One of the things that you saw in my block quote was that the font was much larger. I set the font size of this block quote to 1.5 em. You may recall an em is a unit of measurement. It's a relative unit of measurement that's based on the default size of the font. So this is half again as large as the default size of the font, roughly the size of an H2. There we go. So you can see it is actually the same size as my H2 here. The next thing that I did with my block quote is I changed the font family from the same thing as my body copy to a contrasting font. I used a serif font. The default serif font for Chrome is it's something kind of like Times New Roman, but it's not Times New Roman. So I'm just going to use serif, font family, serif. Good, that looks nice. It's a contrasting font from the rest of the body copy. The next thing I did is I gave it a little bit of extra line height to space those lines out. Right now they're mashed right on top of each other and it looks really crunched. It looks hard to read and I just really don't like it. So I'm going to give it extra line height. Oops, line dash height. I'm going to go to 1.5 em. Save it, refresh it. That looks pretty good. Another thing that I did with this is I gave it a little bit of margin, extra margin on the top and bottom, a little bit of margin on the left side. And I'm going to use my shorthand notation for this, so margin, top and bottom 4%. Right 0, bottom 4%, left 6%. And I think that should be pretty nice. That looks pretty good. Now that really jumps out from the rest of the content. That extra margin on the top and bottom here really makes it stand out. All right, now the next thing that I did was I made that quote quite a bit larger than it is. Right now it's the default size. I'm going to make this huge. So I'm going to go down to the block quote before, set the font size to 4em. Save it. Check it in the browser. Yep, that's about the right size, but look at where it is. It appeared way up there. I don't want that. I want it to appear right down next to these letters here. So I have to do something called vertical align. Vertical align is a property that will allow you to align something vertically in relation to its baseline. So you can move it up, you can move it down. So I'm going to align that to, let's see here. I'm going to start with negative 0.5 em and see what that looks like. Oops, not 1.5. Eek. Negative 0.5 em. And that didn't quite do it. Oh, that's why. I knew there was something wrong. It should have done it. vertical. You got to tell me when I get typos. There we go. So that moved it way down, and that's too low. You can see it's down below the baseline of my first line of text. That looks terrible. I'm going to see what 0.3 em looks like. Save it. Refresh it. That's really close, but I think it could just a little bit lower. 0.4 em. A little bit too low. So that tells me 0.35 em is probably going to be good. There we go. I did some pixel pushing until it got to the right spot. 0.35 em looks pretty nice. Now watch this. I'm going to do something. I'm going to set this to 0.6 em. Save it. Watch what happens to this line right here when I refresh. Okay? I don't like that. I mean, obviously I don't like that this quotation mark is so far down, but I don't like this quotation mark pushing down this line. So what I need to do, I need to set the line height on this to something relatively small. By condensing the line height up, it's going to make it so it doesn't push other lines down. So I'm going to go to 0.1 em. There we go. That brought this right back up next to it. That's pretty good. Let's see what happens when I go to 0 em. Line height 0. And it shoved it up just a little bit more. I'm going to put my quote back where it belongs. And that was at 0.35. Save it. Refresh it. And that looks pretty good. Things go together nicely here. I've got the line spacing that I want in between these. This quote is sitting in the right spot. I've got good margins on the tops and bottoms and left. It's looking pretty good. Now some things that I can do to set it out from the rest of the text. I'm going to give it a background color on my block quote. And then I'm going to give it a left border, kind of like you saw before. I'm going to change the font color a little bit. So play around a little. Background color. Dark gray. Now I know dark gray isn't part of it's not part of my color scheme, but that's okay. I'm just kind of playing around right now. Now we've got some problems. The block quote is busting out of the top of the box. We've got the content touching the edge of the boxes. You know that I can't stand that. It's one of my pet peeves is having content breaking out of the containers and content touching the edges of the box. So I need to do something, and that would be padding. So I'm going to add some padding to my block quote. I'm going to start at 2% and see what it looks like. Anytime you have content touching the edge of a box, that means you need to put some padding in there. Remember, padding is the space in between the content and the edge of the box. Boom. That gave us just a little bit of space around the edges of our content. That's kind of nice. It feels a little bit more open. If you wanted to, you could put more space on the top or more space on the bottom. I'm just going to leave it as is for now. I'm going to put that border on the left side that we saw in my example. Border dash left. 10 pixels, solid, black. That looks pretty good. Now, I have very low contrast between my font color and my background color. So let's change that. Color, EEE. It's going to be a very light gray. And that looks pretty darn good. If I wanted to, I could punch it up a little bit more and go to FFF. But I think that's it's pretty close to not enough contrast. I might have to make the background darker or make that font a little bit lighter. I'm not so worried about that right now. I'm more concerned with the technical concerns of getting the block quote to look the way I want using the box model properties and pushing those quotes around where it needs to go. So this looks pretty good. You can use this in your own design, play around with the box model a little bit differently, see what happens when you use different background colors, different white space, different fonts, different font size, different looking quotes. There are so many things that you could do with block quotes. What I encourage you to do is look at some different websites where you find block quotes. Find some good examples and try and emulate them. Maybe even do some web searches for different tutorials on how to handle block quotes. It's a pretty powerful tool to help lead people into an article that you're posting online. So there you have it, the basics of the block quote. Thanks for watching.